Who's that coming down the track? It's a mean machine in red and white. Ain't nothing finer in the land. Them drunk obnoxious Georgia fans. Go, go! Go, go!
What's up, y'all? This is John and Caleb back for another episode of the Nothing Finer podcast. As always, find us on Fans First Sports Network or Millions.co. Today, just a little inside the park baseball. We are recording this on Tuesday. Caleb's going out of town on Thursday evening when we would normally record. So this is Tuesday. So it is 7:51 p.m. That means, yes, the Georgia versus Florida basketball game is on. I have said...
Don't spoil it for us if you're watching this later.
Yeah, that's the most that I'm going to say about this. Yeah, halftime just started as of
Yeah.
this moment.
Yeah,
But
the good news is it is looking not bad. The bad news is Mike White is still our head coach. So
I said I wasn't going to say nothing.
well, that's all I'm gonna say. That's all. I'm the
I
one who
said
said
I wasn't
something.
going to say nothing, so I don't know how to respond to that.
Fair enough.
But I do want to ask you guys to go ahead and vote for us on Connect Savannah's Best of Savannah. Once again, best podcast and best social media influencer is what it's called. It should be under the influencer for us, but
That took me a little too long to think through. Under the influencer. That's good.
yeah, what's one thing we're good at? Talking and drinking. That's two
Yeah,
things. Not
fair
good at
enough.
math.
Who needs math? Look, kids,
Um,
your teachers are lying to you. You will not need math in your future. You just won't.
I I actually very much disagree with that. But you don't. Okay, if there's any kids
AI is gonna
listening
do
to
all your
this,
math for you one day anyway.
if there's any kids listening to this, you actually use ratios much more as an adult than you thought you would in high school.
That's true. That is true.
I don't
Stay
know.
in school, kids.
Yeah, I don't know why ratios is something that I feel like when you ask your teacher how, like, when am I going to use this? They never talk about ratios.
Yeah, they
Use it
should. That
all
is
the
that is
time.
the answer. That
Yeah,
is the answer.
yeah. Um, but we are doing another episode of Fixing College Football.
I don't know.
And there's the audio once again. Um, Lost my train of thought. Oh, how you been? What are you drinking?
I am being boring and drinking water. I could be better, to be honest with you. My daughter and I were playing doctor earlier. Well, she was playing doctor. I was the patient, and turns out I was diagnosed with cooties. So
Oh no.
yeah, if any of my ex-girlfriends are listening, you might want to get yourself checked out for that. It's pretty serious, but no, I've been good. Been looking forward to a nice weekend out of town. How about you?
I'm pretty good. Pretty good. It's back warm in Savannah again, so what does that mean?
Yes.
Everyone's feeling sick. Uh, you
Yeah.
know, when you wake up and it's 35 on Sunday morning and middle of the day on Tuesday, it's 78. No one's gonna feel good anymore.
Yeah.
Um,
I wore this t-shirt and shorts for a walk outside earlier, and I was like, what's funny about it is next week it's probably going to be back in the 30s just in time for March. So, I don't know.
so it's not supposed to be that way for us. I'll say that.
Okay. Well, that's
Um,
good.
But I will. So I was working outside today, set my phone down in the grass, and I picked it up. I have a black phone case. The back of it was yellow, and I was like, "Oh no, oh no, it's the pollinating. It's
Uh,
it's here." Um, but no, I'm
I
also
saw some
being.
wasps flying around. I'm not a fan of that.
Oh, I saw some honeybees when I was working outside earlier.
Well, those are nice. I
Yeah,
can
yeah,
handle
yeah.
some honeybees.
Love a good pollinator. They were in some honeysuckle that was
Mm.
by where I was working. Real, real pleasant for being fixing broken things.
Yeah, okay, there we go. Spring is in the air, everybody, which means it won't be long before we can forget about this godforsaken basketball season.
But yeah, man, I got a caffeine-free Diet Coke over here. I almost brought the bottle of Pepto in here to take shots from. Uh, just I I'm old. Got home from work. My wife's like, "What do you want for dinner?" And I said, "Right now, nothing," because I feel like I am just continuously eating acid with this acid
Mm.
reflux. It's pretty awful. Um, yeah, so acid reflux plus liquor probably not a good move. So
Yeah,
just taking baby sips off this caffeine free Diet Coke. I'm old.
gotta do what you gotta do.
All right. So this week we are getting into scheduling. Um, Last week, if you didn't listen, pause, go back, listen, and welcome back. Nice to see you again. Um, but last week we talked about our thoughts on a new governing body for college football, doing away with the NCAA, installing a new governing body. And
I believe Bill
so,
Belichick would have been in charge if he hadn't taken the UNC job, is what we decided.
I mean, that I think he would have done great. Because what does
Yeah.
he do? Not care about anyone's feelings.
Yeah.
And, you got to have an asshole in charge.
That's how
Um,
WWE did it for years.
I know there's a whole Netflix documentary, but I wonder if Vince is actually an asshole in real life.
Yeah, it's there's some indications, but I'm not gonna say one way or another because I don't know if these indications are real or not.
Um, So this week, going through scheduling. And once again, we're going to go through two different options of the ways to fix the current issue. And um, so one of those is going to be with our proposed college football council in charge. And then the other is way to fix the system using the current way of doing things, using the NCAA model in every conference, kind of fending for itself. Um, just a little bit of forewarning. This may be a little shorter of an episode, but if there's anything we miss when we're going through this, we'll bring it up throughout the rest of these episodes we're doing. So,
There we go.
but one thing that I want to say up front, I personally think the larger programs funding smaller programs by paying them to play games, mostly early in the season and late in the season, I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, I want these
I
programs to exist at every level. Yes.
Correct. FCS programs make their entire football budget by playing big schools.
Hmm.
A lot of MAC programs, Conference USA, make their entire football and sports budget, in some cases, by checks written by the University of Georgia, Notre Dame, and whoever else Ball State has played this year. You know what I mean?
Probably Alabama.
Right. Like Ball State puts themselves through a meat grinder every year to fund their athletics department,
Yep,
and their football program pays the price. It's just
that's it.
how
That's how it
things are
goes when
done.
you're in the MAC.
So I don't think that's a bad thing, but I do think certain conferences and programs within conferences take advantage of that. I think the SEC very obviously falls into that camp,
Yep.
but at the same time, let's qualify that because how many how many times over the last decade has Georgia had an opponent back out on them? And then they filled it with Ball State or Marshall or any of these other lower division programs
The
because
answer ain't zero, and that's 4 games, by the way.
yeah,
That, just from the two I can come up with off the top of my head, that is 4 games.
just from the last 2 years.
Yeah.
That's 2 or 4. Like so is it entirely Georgia's program that they have some of these games? No. But, there are some Power 5 programs that claim anybody, anytime, anywhere. You cancel the OU game, you call up the Super Soakers and say, "Hey, are you standing on business here? Cancel your FCS school, cancel, the Utah Tech State Thunderbirds, and come on to Athens." And that hasn't happened. So
Yep.
it's not their fault, but they're not trying to fix the issue.
Yeah.
All right, so getting into College Football Council solution. If they wanted to even out all college football schedules, and I say even out from a number of Group of Five, number of FBS, number of FCS, number of conference, that
Yeah.
sort of even, um, then the main decision that they would have to make is 8 conference games or 9 conference games. And if you haven't been paying attention off-season content over the last few years, 8 or 9 conference games is a very contentious area
Yep.
between different conferences.
Mainly the SEC and the others, but yes, there's also some other smaller conferences that do 8 games.
The ACC is in league with the SEC on this.
Yeah, yeah, one of the smaller conferences.
Um, but here's the reason that I think it is the most contentious point in the scheduling issue. Other than TV contracts, and ESPN agreed with
Hmm.
the SEC before they even considered going to 9 games. That's really the only reason the SEC hasn't done it yet. Spoiler alert. But the reason that it's contentious for athletic directors and fans. How many teams during the 14 playoff era won the national championship playing 9 conference games?
Okay, I haven't looked at this note. I'm going to think off the top of my head. In the playoff era, is it only 3?
2, first
2?
and last.
Michigan played a 9-game schedule, right?
Yep. Well, the first one, Ohio State 2014. The last
Yeah.
one, Michigan 2023.
Did Ohio State not play 9 games this year?
I said 14 playoff.
Oh, you did say 14. I
Yep.
just said playoff
Yeah,
era
yeah, yeah.
for some reason. That is my B.
Well, I mean, if you count this, it is 3, but it's 3 over the course of 10 years.
Yeah.
And it went Ohio State, SEC, and ACC, Michigan. And, it makes a huge difference because in that time, how many quality semifinal games did we have between teams that played 8 conference games and 9 conference games? A handful.
I can think of one off the top of my head, but I know there's probably a couple more.
Yeah, like legit only a handful of quality games that we saw in that time period.
Yeah.
Um, so I think it makes a big difference. And if Ohio State in 2014 wasn't Ohio State, think about it. In their conference schedule that consisted of 9 conference games in 2014, they enter the playoff on their third string quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
That should make a big difference there. But current conferences that have 8 versus 9 conference games, the SEC, ACC, AAC, Conference USA, MAC, and Fun Belt are all currently 8 conference games.
All the best ones, really, and just in terms of entertainment value.
Um,
ACC excluded because they're a stain.
well, the SEC and ACC have won more national championships in the playoff era than the Big 12 and Big 10 combined this century.
That is true.
So, but 9 conference games, Big 12 and Big 10, and then just throwing it in there, the Mountain West has 7. It's
Odd.
because I think it's because they
They only
like
have so many teams.
well, they also have Oregon State and Wazoo that
Oh
they
yeah,
are
the Pac-2 jump
yeah.
in there. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think this is going to piss off fans of the big conferences, and I say big as in title,
The ones with
not
the name big in it.
yeah,
Yeah.
correct. 8 conference games is superior to schedule, not just for national championships, but in this world that we're existing in right now, the College Football Council is saying you're playing 8 conference games. With 8 conference games, that gives every team the ability to schedule one pay to play team, which I think every team should be responsible for having one pay to play team on their
Yep.
schedule.
Yep. Completely agree.
And I mean, you can get an SEC Big Ten challenge in college football if that's the way the schedule is mandated. You can get an ACC Big 12, or here's what I am most excited about. Partner up most schools with one school from every other Core 4 conference. Your first month of the season, you got a college football round robin. Four team
Ooh.
tournament. Four team tournament. You got an SEC, ACC, Big 12, and Big 10 school play any one game, and the next year, the games that you were away, you're at home, and then you move on to another set of schools.
I dig it. I dig it.
Yeah, I mean it gives you the opportunity to have a lot bigger games, have a lot more competitive games, see a lot of different areas of the country. I know it is a joke that we make on this show all the time. Georgia played a conference game in Texas before or in Austin before they
Oh,
played one in College Station.
yeah. Ridiculous.
It is.
Ridiculous.
It is. It is hilarious.
Yeah. That is also true. Both
But
things can be true at once.
it is absolutely ridiculous because of the way the old scheduling format was. Because at the time they were 6 opponents locked in and year out. 7, because
7.
Georgia always played Auburn. 7 of your 12 games are locked in and year out. Once Kirby got there, he wanted to play a neutral site big name game. So then you're talking about 8, 9 when you're talking about Georgia Tech.
Yep.
So you got 3 games to fill up. Oh, and 2 of those non-conference games that we just talked about are still against Power 5 opponents. You have to build in at least 1 or 2 games to get you guys right, figure out your depth, do all that kind of stuff against a real world opponent. So 8 conference games in a world where everyone is forced to be equal
Yeah.
is the way to go.
Yeah. I have to agree. I actually took it a step further and got even more specific. So hopefully you will hear me out and do my
Yep.
pitch. I think this method that I'm going to bring up would leave room for something like a challenge between uh, 2 conferences if we wanted to go that route. But I think it's also just got a good way to do it if we don't do that one year. So I agree. Force everyone to 8 conference games. Uh, Obviously, we want to regulate the cupcake games. We don't want to have those happening all the time. Sometimes those are no one's fault. Sometimes it's a conference's fault for canceling a game for a stupid reason.
Yep.
Sometimes it's a team's fault for backing out. UCLA, fight us, cowards.
Yep.
But something needs to change. So in this format with the College Football Council, uh, I think we still give teams some autonomy over their non-conference schedule, but not complete autonomy. And so again, that means that each team should have the opportunity to schedule a home and home with a similarly ranked opponent each season. And by that I mean Core 4 versus Core 4, Power 5 or Group of 5 versus Group of 5. Notre Dame sucks it up and joins the conference already. And then you can get one non-conference game per year, as you mentioned, with some lower tier pay-to-play team. Get it out of the way, fund their program. That's great. but never 3 out of your 4 non-conference games doing that, Georgia.
Yeah.
Again, teams pansy out. It happens. And then you get the third slot can be a non-conference rivalry. If you have one, you can throw that in there. Any other non-conference game slots that are not scheduled, which again, it would at least be one. If we're doing 4 conference games, you would have at least one every year that falls under that. Maybe 2, maybe somebody backs out and you get 3. Basically be decided by spinning a wheel to determine who plays who. Coin flip to determine home field. I mean, randomized non-conference scheduling for those extra games. Could you imagine the games we would get if they were totally random?
And that's something that I forgot to write in here, but I agree with you, and I think scheduling a decade ahead is so dumb. I understand you want to get things locked in, you want to get your contract set up, but think about the situation that the SEC is currently in, right? So we all know Georgia and Florida State have a home and home schedule for some time over the next few years.
Yeah, 27 I think is when it starts. Yeah.
Okay. What happens if the SEC goes non-conference games?
Then in 2027, our 3 non-conference games will be Florida State, Louisville, and Georgia Tech, as currently stands scheduled.
Yeah, right.
Kirby won't like that.
No. So one of those is going to get canceled, and it will not be Georgia Tech. Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
So scheduling these things out a decade in advance is stupid.
Yeah.
I love your randomly generated, like, don't even let the College Football Council have an opinion on it. Just say, all right, we're going for Georgia's opponents, and go.
Yep, that's it. And, just fill it in on a grid. You could do it a couple of years in advance just to, get all the logistics ready.
I think for this situation, you would need to do it like how the SEC did it for 2024 and 25.
Yeah.
You have, all right, these are your opponents this year. Here's your home and away this year. Next year, the games you played away, you're playing at home.
Yeah, I could see that. That would definitely work. And then, yeah, so I think that would be the way to do it. And then let me see where I am in my notes now, because I have a little more to unpack here. This also would probably require, if you're going to do it this way, to have set weeks where you do your non-conference games and set weeks where you do your conference games. I have pitched before, just on Instagram, requiring the 4 non-conference games to be played week 1, week 2, week 3, and then the second to last week of the season, with teams being allowed to submit a waiver if they have a non-conference rivalry to do it the last week of the season instead. So you still get that, but if you're getting a cupcake week, your 11th game, you can do that too. It doesn't really matter. And then everybody gets to win that way. But again, this would require Notre Dame to suck it up and join a conference.
And with the Notre Dame thing, I understand why they don't. Tim Priester, we've talked to him a couple of times over the last few years about why they haven't and why they probably won't.
Yeah.
But I think should college football get to the place where we're hoping it gets with a governing body outside of the NCAA, that governing body has to tell them to what's the thing that Connor says on the SDS podcast all the time? Adapt or die.
Yep.
Either have your football team quit being your only sport, not in a conference, or realize that you're now FCS.
Yeah, those are your choices.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the FCS community would love to have you. The NCAA would love to keep you around, but
there's a lot of years the Dakotas would run roughshod over Notre Dame. I mean, there's like 4 universities in the Dakotas, and then if you throw Montana State in there, they've won every FCS title over the last decade.
Yeah. I mean, Notre Dame went 0-12 this century. Let's not forget.
Yeah. So, no, I agree with you there.
Yeah. But just for fun, I decided to look at Georgia's schedule for this coming year and do it under this format. I chose this season specifically. I was going to do one further down the line, but I chose this season just because I think we're all a little disappointed in this season's schedule. Again, nobody's fault but UCLA's. But just
Can
thought
we
we could
blame
use a
Chip
little.
Kelly for that?
I would love to blame Chip Kelly for that.
All right, Chip
Uh,
Kelly, it's your fault.
yeah, but just a fun little hypothetical here. So I spun the wheel a couple of times to see what we'd end up with. Week 1, what we would get is a nice home game against Pitt.
Okay.
Doesn't that
Pitt,
sound fun?
Pitt with a sleeper Heisman pick at running back.
Yeah, yeah. Would be a fun matchup. We'd still pay Austin P at to play week 2. Thank you very much for the check. That sounds great. Week 3 would be the other one because we obviously get Georgia Tech week 12. The Wheel of Fate sends Georgia on the road to play Dan Mullen at UNLV, which
I'm
just sounds like a fun game.
here for it.
Yeah.
Here
So
for it.
yeah. So those are the kinds of schedules you get when you just let fate decide instead of leaving teams completely autonomous to schedule whatever cupcakes they want every week.
And here's the thing about it. The I feel like the big reason that a lot of schools don't want to do this is a level of competition. You don't want it to be too high that you're going to lose games and be out of the playoff race in the first part of the season. Um, but I feel like a lot of teams don't want to give up that home field early in the year with the money from it. But let's be real, guys. Georgia versus Pitt at home, moneymaker. People
Yeah,
are
for sure.
absolutely going to that game.
TV ratings are going to be in too. It's a rare matchup.
And then UNLV, the storylines ESPN
Yes.
would get from that.
Will Georgia get Dan Mullen fired again?
Yeah, the storylines ESPN would get from that being Georgia playing at UNLV in Guy Fieri's house against Dan Mullen.
Man, just
Guy Fieri on game day? Are you kidding?
all right.
Here for it.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm gonna randomly generate a couple other ones here, just because we have some time. See what else we could get. I'm seeing. Let me spin 2 teams so I can get a full matchup. So they throw together. But BYU at NC State. Who's not watching that game?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, so you could end up with a really good group of 5 team. You could end up with another core 4 game and really stretch yourself. Make sure put the best against the best. Either way, I think folks would want to see. And yeah, sure, sometimes you're playing a weird game, like you're going to get Alabama at Kennesaw State, whatever. Maybe you limit the randomization to teams on each other's levels. I don't know, but
Yeah,
sure beats the heck out of 3 weeks at the beginning of the season of mostly cupcake games.
and especially, if we're being honest, as college football fans, we got really spoiled over the last few years with opening week
Oh,
going
yeah.
from Thursday to Monday night being phenomenal games every day. And then this past year, it was like, meh,
Man.
for the first month of the season. And then it got wild. It did get
Yeah.
wild after the first
Eventually.
month. But that first month, there were a lot of times where I'd be like, there's not really a game I want to watch on till 4. Yeah, we can go run some errands on Saturday morning.
Which is crazy to think about, considering who we are. But I was the same way.
Yeah. All right. So are we ready to talk about how things need to be fixed in the current format?
Yeah. If we gotta keep the NCAA around, let's see what we do about this.
All right. So if the NCAA stays around and with their lack of backbone and teeth, let's
That's a good way to put it.
you know what? Let's call the SEC or the NCAA an amoeba. There's no bones, no teeth, just kind of
Yep.
floating around, gelatinous. The SEC and ACC have to move to 9 conference games.
Yeah, there's really no other way around it. If you're gonna, itemize the schedule. The conferences have so much pool and autonomy right now. There's not going to be a world in which they don't have a ton of say in how the schedules get moved forward, and it's going to pull in the direction of 9. That's just going to be the natural way things go. They love the blue bloods. A lot of those are in the Big Ten. They're going to have a lot of say.
Right. And one of the reasons that I think the SEC and ACC have to move to 9 conference games. Conversations that surrounded the final playoff poll this year are entirely different if Alabama had a 9th conference game this year.
Yep. Ole Miss had a
Alabama,
9th conference game as well.
let's say Alabama beats a surging Florida team at the end of the year. That's an entirely different conversation. And if they beat the hell out of the team that just beat Ole Miss, do you think Alabama does not get into the playoff over SMU?
I think there's an argument to be made.
Ole Miss. Let's say Ole Miss Ole Miss hosts Alabama and wins that game as their 9th conference game. Ole Miss in the playoff 8 days a week.
Yeah, 100%.
Clemson. Clemson won the ACC, but let's say, or SMU is probably a better example. SMU snuck in to the playoff.
If they beat, say, oh gosh, what ACC team? If they go down to Miami, they didn't play Miami this year, right? If they go down to Miami and beat Cam Ward at Miami at the end of the year, they're probably.
Let's say Miami beats SMU.
Oh yeah, that's true.
There's two
Miami could
entirely
sneak in
different
there.
conversations with that extra conference game.
Yeah, if SMU wins that game, they might be hosting. If Miami wins that game, they're probably in. They're probably in the ACC championship game if they win that game.
And I know that the argument against that is these programs could just schedule another Core 4 opponent in the season. But what happens when Georgia wins back-to-back national championships and UCLA is like, actually...
Don't want to touch that anymore. Yeah.
And then you're stuck.
Because other conferences don't have the incentive to play the extra game because they play the extra conference game.
Right. So that's
unless you just want the SEC and ACC playing each other all the time, but they already kind of do because of all the rivalries between those two conferences.
Yep. And in a way to potentially fix the situation with all these programs canceling their out-of-conference Core 4 games is instead of the contract saying, oh, you just have to pay us this buyout, you have to pay us this buyout, and if you cannot get us another Core 4 opponent, you have to also pay the Group of 5 / FCS school.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. I don't know why that's not a thing already.
But not just you have to pay us and pay us whatever we're paying this FCS school. You have to find us a Core 4 opponent or find us and pay for the FCS opponent. Your athletic director has to do all the work.
By the way, if that was how it worked, how often? Because you know what would happen. Like, say you get a situation where, say, BYU decides to cancel a series with Oregon. If Dan Lanning called up Kirby Smart, you know he's taking that game.
Against BYU?
Against Oregon. I'm saying BYU did the canceling. I guess BYU would be making the call in that case, but my point still stands. Kirby's taking he'll take it against BYU too. I don't care.
I don't know about BYU. I think it depends on where it lines up. And I say that because if that's the first game of the season and you can get your boys out there 2 weeks early to fully acclimate to the elevation, I think that is I think Kirby goes for it. But if you're getting there on Thursday for a Saturday game, Wednesday or Thursday for a Saturday game at a mile high, he ain't taking that game.
Yeah, that's fair. Maybe BYU wasn't the right example, but you understand my point though.
Yeah,
Not 9 times out of 10 under normal circumstances, all else being equal, Kirby will take the extra core 4 game.
yeah. No, I agree with that. But sadly, that's not the world that we get the opportunity to live in.
Yeah,
The world we live in is where UCLA backs out and Georgia schedules
Marshall,
Austin
because
Peay. Or was it
yeah,
Marshall?
I think Marshall's the one who took that week the slot that would have been UCLA's because
I got you.
no one else was available.
Yeah. And apparently, Marshall may not have a team available, depending on how
Yeah,
their recruiting has gone.
apparently, uh, apparently, if you fire your coach after you win your conference, the players aren't too happy.
Yeah, I can see that. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And also, they didn't fire him; they just never gave him another contract.
Which is almost more disrespectful.
Yeah, they just never kept him employed.
They're just like, oh yeah, this guy was working here. Oh, well, let's just not worry about it.
Yeah, like I wonder if we ignore him, will he go away?
Right.
Um, but do you have any other takes on how we can fix scheduling?
I don't know. I do think there needs to be some kind of way for if we get this council or even for the NCAA to look at these conference schedules and determine, okay, is this being done fairly? And this isn't even sour grapes about Georgia's schedule the past couple of years. Like, bring it on. I don't care. But I do have sour grapes about Texas's conference schedule a little bit in the same
And
vein. So,
so I would say that water finds its level in a sense that they're going to get punished when it comes to the playoff, but
right.
they didn't.
Yeah,
Um,
they got the 5 seed.
right. So they didn't get punished when it came to the playoff, and
They finished ranked number 3 in that poll, just behind Georgia, who beat them twice.
when it comes to the current playoff format, and for all we know, there was quite literally a meeting about the playoff this afternoon. We
It
don't.
could change in a
It,
heartbeat.
it could be actively changing right now.
Yeah.
But with the way that first round buys are seeded, it also gives you no incentive because if Texas would have won the SEC after that easy schedule, they would have gone in almost entirely healthy to the second round of the playoff because they didn't play anybody except Georgia, who they lost to.
Yep.
So, no, I definitely think there needs to be a way to hold teams accountable and hold conferences accountable more than anything because
For sure.
the conferences have always done this. The Big Ten protected uh, Ohio State and Oregon this year. Tried to protect
Yeah.
USC, they just couldn't, provide any sort of defense. Um, the SEC did it with. They tried to do
Hey,
it with Alabama and Texas.
they
Um,
did it. They did it with A&M for years when they joined the conference. They said, "Oh, these guys have to play Alabama every year. We better not schedule Georgia."
yeah, so there definitely needs to be something changed, but
Mhm.
how that can be done, I think it truly has to be on the playoff committee with the current setup.
Yeah.
And the playoff committee looks at box scores instead of games or
Mm.
quality of opponent.
Which is only what the smartest football minds do, he
Right.
said
I mean, that's how
sarcastically.
you get a job at like ESPN. Um,
Yep.
so can't blame them. I want to know how much Florida paid the referees at halftime.
Yeah, the lead has diminished.
Well, in the play that I just watched, Asa Newell stood with his arms up and got called for a two-shot foul.
Yeah. Insane.
Yep. That just kind of wild to me how standing with your feet on the ground with your arms straight up means the other team gets two
It's,
shots there.
yeah, yeah. You know,
And it
what can you
doesn't help
do?
that Georgia's at their 15th turnover of the game.
Yeah, that doesn't help. But it also just doesn't help that Mike White, for whatever reason, seems allergic to beating Florida.
He seems
Um,
allergic to holding on to a lead.
that is also true. So we'll see how it goes. So glad we got Florida's sloppy seconds as our basketball head coach. But we're probably going to win this game and then win 3 games in the SEC tournament, and I'll forgive him for it because that's just who I am.
I don't know if we should forgive him.
Yeah.
He just, instead of being on the hot seat, he's in line. He's on
Yeah,
probation.
he's like you're cool, but I'm watching you.
Right. Right. Like the friend you caught like peeing in the flowers at your party. When he's over, if he walks outside, you're going with him. You know
Yeah,
what I
yeah.
mean?
You might not kick him out right away until you see him doing something wrong, but you're gonna keep your eye on him.
Yeah. Mike White's the friend that pees in the flowers. If you know. All right, that's gonna do it for this episode of the Nothing Finer podcast. This episode of Fixing College Football. This is part 2. Kaleb and I are doing one every week unless some sort of interview or something pops up that we jump on. But follow us on social media. You know all the places. Vote for us on Connect Savannah's Best of Savannah. Help us kidnap Kaleb. And
Hashtag help us kidnap Kaleb.
and as always, remember there is nothing finer in the land
Than a drunk, obnoxious Georgia fan.